how to start the Oracle database and shut down the database. So there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of options in starting the database and also ways to shut down the database. So let's do one thing, and this process is done as you have to log in as a sysdba. So let me show this in a Windows environment. The first thing I need to do is I need to connect to my Oracle SID. My Oracle SID is Angel. I click SQL plus sys/oracle as sysdba. I have to log in as sysdba, or I should have sysoper privilege to handle it. Now when I log in as sysdba, let me first shut down my existing database. You do a shutdown by giving a command like shutdown immediate. What would happen is by pressing shutdown immediate, it will stop all the transactions and roll back all the existing transactions and shut down the database immediately. Now let me do a startup of the database. The normal way, what happens is when you the Oracle database uh, starts automatically. You in NT or XP, you go into the Oracle service, and here you see the startup type. The startup type could be set out here to be automatic or manual. So here it is manual right now. I just click on automatic and click on start, and then what would happen is whenever I start the Oracle database or whenever I start my machine, the database is started automatically. Now when I press the command startup, this is called a normal startup. What happens is the first process the database goes through is called no mount, and then it takes the values from the database parameter file or the server parameter file. In the mount state, it accesses the control file and checks whether all the data files, redo log files are all perfect or all they are present. The file structure has not been changed, and then it opens the database. So the three states are no mount state, the mount state, and then the open state. You see now when I typed here startup, the database is open. The database is in an open state. So the process involved are no mount, then mount, and the open state. In the no mount state, when the database reaches the mount state, that time the Oracle would have checked with the control file whether all the naming, all the files are intact. If it is intact, then it goes through the mount state and then opens the database. To know the existing database state, just fire a query on $database table. Select name comma open mode from $database. Now this query will tell us the state of the database. Now here you see the database is in a mount state, sorry, open state. So when the open mode is read write, means the database is open. Now let's do one thing. Let's see the startup no mount state. What would happen is if your data files have been changed, your control file is missing or redo log file is missing during the mount state, if it sees that problem, the Oracle database won't go to the mount state and it will jump to the no mount state. And it is during the no mount state that you fire commands like create database if you are manually creating the database. So right now I'll just shut down the database by firing the command shutdown immediate. startup no mount. Now the database is in a no mount state. So at this time what happens is Oracle looks from the parameters, reads the parameters from the parameter file or the server parameter file, and access the memory of the database, but it cannot access any of the file structure of the Oracle database. So this is called a no mount state. So for example, if I try to fire a command like $database, this is a file structure of the Oracle database, it cannot access it. It cannot access any of the physical file structure of the Oracle database because Oracle cannot read the control file. Select name open mode from $database. See, this $database is actually a table which is inside the Oracle database. It cannot be accessed because the database is not mounted. So now let's do one thing. Let's mount the database. Now the database is in a mount state. During the mount state, the Oracle checks the control file whether all the file structure is okay and brings your database in a mount state. During this state, if I fire queries like dba underscore data files or $database, and I fire queries like I want to see the name of the database and the state of the database, so it shows me I'm able to access the Oracle internal tables like tables like $database, data file. All those tables could be accessed because these are dictionary Oracle internal tables. So right now it shows me the state is in a mounted state, but note I cannot access any of my Oracle user created tables or dictionary tables. Let's say for example, if I fire a query on dba underscore data files, you see when I fire a query on dba underscore data files, it says database is not allowed. Query is allowed only on fixed table views. So $database is an example of fixed tables or views. Fixed tables also have like tables with name $, etc. And you bring your database in a mount state. For example, when you want to rename a data file, rename a redo log file, or bring your database in an archive log mode. So in that scenario, you bring your database in a mount state. Now let's understand about the next state called the startup open state. So for that, I just give a command like alter database open, and the database is open. Once when the database is open, I am able to access all the dictionary tables, all the tables in the database. Now again, there are two more types of opening of database. One is called startup force and the other is called startup restrict. Before understanding startup force, let's understand about shutdown about. Suppose you got some users who are firing some large transactions and you do the command shutdown immediate. What would happen is the database won't shut down immediately because it's waiting for that user to complete that transaction. So imagine you are in a scenario where you want to immediately close all sort of transactions. You don't want to roll back the data and you want to start the database immediately. What you do is you give the command shutdown abort. Normally you just fire the command shutdown immediate. Immediate would wait for the transaction to complete and shut down the database. So it's a clean shutdown. But shutdown abort is not a clean abort because whatever transaction is occurring, it will just abort that transaction. It won't even undo back the transaction and it will shut the database. After it shuts the database, when we fire a command startup, that time it does the recovery. So this is one of the way you shut down the database. So let's understand the different other way of opening the database was by using the command startup force open. Now what it would do is startup force open means it will shut down abort the database immediately and restart the database. So what happened is when we fired this internally, it did fire the command shutdown abort, it shut down the database and restarted the database. So it went through the phase of no mount, then went through the phase of mount, and since here there is no problem in the database is opened immediately. Now it is in the state of mount, you can see here. And now it is open. So now if I fire the query select name open mode from v $database, it shows me the database is in an open state and I can access all the tables. Now let's know more about startup restrict. Now startup restrict, what it would do is first is I'll have to shut down the database immediately, and when I give the command startup restrict, what would happen is the database would be open, but the users who are not having restrict privilege won't be allowed to enter anything into the database. They won't be allowed to enter the database. Only those users who are having restrict privilege would be able to access the database. So let's do a startup restrict. So now what would happen is the database would be open, but only users who have restrict privilege would be able to access the database. Why is it users? Suppose you are a DBA and you don't want any other users to access the system and you're running some program where only you should be given the privilege. So then you fire this command, that is startup open restrict. Yeah, now the database is open. Let me connect a Scott user and see what happens. Yeah, unluckily the Scott user has been given DBA privilege here. You see here, this Tome user has resource and connect privilege. It doesn't have a DBA privilege. So when user named Tome is trying to connect to the database, he gets a message, Oracle ORA 01035, Oracle only available to users with restricted system session privilege. So now what I do is I fire a command from here. So I fire the command now, alter system disable restricted session. Yeah, so now what has happened is that restricted session has been removed, that particular right has been removed. So now I connect as Tome, select star from cat. That's it. You see, now you are able to log in even though you don't have restricted session privilege. So that was various ways of Oracle startup. Now let's understand shutdown. The first sort of shutdown which you normally do if you just fire shutdown is normal shutdown. During this process, what would happen is it will wait for the existing transaction to get over and then it will shut down. But shutdown cannot shut down while in a transaction. Commit or rollback first. Okay. Shutdown. So that is because there is some transaction occurring, and so that's why it is telling I can't shut down the database unless and until there is a transaction. So I'll just say rollback and I just do a command like shutdown. Now this is a normal shutdown, so it will wait for all the transactions to get over and there is a shutdown going to occur. But suppose in that scenario if I log in, it says a message shutdown is in progress, connection not permitted. Now the other sort of shutdown is called shutdown transactional. What happens in shutdown transactional is you won't be able to log in and you won't be able to fire any transaction once when I give that statement, and the existing transactions could be completed. So let me show this example again, because there would be a bit confusion between startup normal and startup transaction, shutdown normal and shutdown transaction. So let's say now the database is open. I log in as a user, say Scott, and I fire a command like delete from test. And one more user is there named Tom. Table values. Okay, so there are places where there are transactions occurring. So if I give a command like shutdown, what happens? This is like shutdown normal. There's already a transaction occurring. So this time what it would happen is it will wait for this transaction to get over. And here also I try to fire a transaction. So I'm able to fire a transaction in shutdown normal. You see that? And what I'll do is I'll do a commit. So this transaction will get complete. And then what would happen is since all the transactions are complete, I have to do a commit here too. The database will be shut down because all the transactions are complete. So that was shutdown normal. Since I'm still waiting, what I'll do is I'll just click exit. I'll exit out of this Windows too. And you see now the database is closed. Okay, now let's see shutdown transactional in action. I fire the command shutdown transactional. Now the moment I fire this command, what would happen is, let me see whether I am able to fire any transaction now. You see, I'm not able to fire any transactions now. Why? Because I have given the command shutdown transaction. It will wait for the existing transactions to get complete, and it will shut down the database. So you see now the database got shut down because there were no transactions being fired. So the difference between shutdown normal and shutdown transactional is, in shutdown transactional you are not allowed to enter any new transactions once when it is fired. The third type of shutdown is shutdown immediate. In shutdown immediate, what it does is it rolls back the existing transaction and shut down the database. And that is shutdown immediate. And you already know what is shutdown abort. Shutdown abort will not even roll back the transaction. It will just shut down the database immediately without rolling back the transaction. And when you do a startup, that time a recovery process is being fired to recover the data. Now this is therefore shutdown abort from all the other shutdowns is not a clean shutdown. That's it for now.